The View studio was already tense before the cameras turned on. Not chaotic, not loud, just tense in the way that happens when everyone in the room knows something might go wrong, and no one's sure who will pull the trigger. Julia Roberts was scheduled to appear on the panel to discuss her latest film project and her longtime advocacy for environmental causes and children's charities. It had been pitched as a warm conversation about her career evolution, her family life, and her philanthropic work. But that was just the version the public saw. Behind the scenes, there were emails, conditions, and warnings. Julia's team had been very specific about keeping the conversation focused on her professional work and charitable initiatives. The View's producers had agreed, or at least they said they had. But just minutes before they walked onto the set, one of the producers whispered something to Joy Behar about pressing her on her political silence and challenging her privilege. And Joy's entire approach shifted. The atmosphere in the studio carried the familiar energy of daytime television mixed with an undercurrent of anticipation that suggested something more significant was brewing. The View's set, designed to feel like a comfortable space where women could have honest conversations, felt different today. More like a courtroom where America's sweetheart was about to face an unexpectedly hostile prosecutor. When Julia finally stepped onto the stage, the applause was immediate and warm. The audience knew they were in the presence of Hollywood royalty, a woman who had defined romantic comedies for a generation and had evolved into one of cinema's most respected dramatic actresses. Julia wore an elegant cream blazer over dark jeans, her signature curls styled naturally, her famous smile radiating the warmth that had made her beloved worldwide. At 56, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had navigated decades in the spotlight while maintaining her authenticity. Whoopi started with appropriate admiration. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable Julia Roberts. Julia, it's always wonderful to have you here." Julia's smile was genuine, her voice carrying that distinctive laugh-touched quality that had charmed audiences for over 3 decades. She said, "Thank you so much for having me, ladies. It's always good to be here with you all." Sarah Haynes jumped in with obvious enthusiasm. She said, "Julia, your new film is getting incredible reviews. What drew you to this particular story?" Julia's eyes lit up with passion for her craft. She said, "You know, Sarah, it's a story about resilience, about finding hope in impossible circumstances. I was drawn to the character's strength and the way she refuses to give up even when everything seems hopeless." Her voice carried genuine emotion as she continued, "I think we all need stories like that right now. Stories that remind us that human beings are capable of extraordinary courage and compassion." For about 20 minutes, the conversation flowed beautifully. Julia discussed her approach to character development, her thoughts on the current state of Hollywood, and her work with various children's charities. The audience was clearly captivated, enjoying her natural charisma and obvious intelligence. Then Joy Behar decided to change the entire tone. She said, "Julia, you've been relatively quiet politically compared to some of your Hollywood peers. Given your platform and influence, don't you feel an obligation to speak out more on important issues like voting rights, reproductive freedom, and social justice?" The question hit the studio like a record scratch. The comfortable atmosphere shifted instantly. Julia's expression moved from relaxed warmth to cautious surprise. She said carefully, "Joy, I've always believed that my primary obligation is to my craft and to the causes I personally support through my charitable work. I try to let my actions speak louder than my political statements." Joy leaned forward aggressively, her voice taking on the confrontational tone that had made her both famous and controversial. She said, "But Julia, when democracy is under attack, when women's rights are being stripped away, when people of color are facing systematic oppression, isn't silence complicity?" The other hosts looked visibly uncomfortable. This wasn't the supportive conversation they had planned with one of America's most beloved actresses. Julia's composure began to show strain, her media training warring with her natural instinct to defend herself. She said, "Joy, I don't think I've been silent. I support organizations that align with my values. I vote. I encourage others to vote. I just don't think every conversation needs to become a political rally." Joy's voice became more accusatory. She said, "But you have enormous privilege, Julia. You're wealthy, you're white, you're famous. Don't you think that privilege comes with responsibility to use your voice for those who don't have one?" That's when something fundamental shifted in Julia's demeanor. The suggestion that her success somehow obligated her to become a political spokesperson struck at something deeper than professional criticism. She said slowly, "My privilege? Joy, let me tell you about privilege. I grew up in a small town in Georgia. My father died when I was 10. My mother worked multiple jobs to support 3 kids. Her voice began to carry an edge that surprised everyone in the studio. I earned everything I have through hard work, talent, and yes, some luck. But I didn't earn it to become anyone's political mouthpiece." The studio was getting quieter, the audience sensing that this had moved beyond normal celebrity interview territory into something more personal. Julia continued, her voice rising with controlled passion. "You want to talk about using my voice? I've raised millions of dollars for UNICEF. I've supported education initiatives in underserved communities. I've advocated for environmental protection. I've used my platform to highlight causes I care deeply about." Joy tried to interrupt, clearly recognizing she had pushed too far. She said, "I'm not diminishing your charitable work." "Yes, you are." Julia's voice filled the studio. "You're suggesting that unless I'm making political statements that align with your views, I'm somehow failing in my responsibility as a privileged person." She stood up slowly, her presence suddenly commanding the space in a way that reminded everyone why she had been a movie star for over 30 years. "You know what I find offensive, Joy? I find it offensive that you think my success obligates me to think the way you want me to think, to say the things you want me to say, to be the kind of activist you think I should be." The audience was completely silent now, witnessing something unprecedented. America's sweetheart pushed to her breaking point on live television. Julia walked around the table, her movement controlled but charged with frustrated energy. "I've spent 30 years in this business being told how to look, how to act, what roles to take, what causes to support. I've finally reached a point in my life where I get to choose my own path." Her eyes blazed with intensity as she faced Joy directly. "And you're sitting here telling me that my choices aren't good enough, that my charitable work doesn't count, that my private political activities aren't sufficient because I won't perform my beliefs for your cameras." Joy's composure was cracking. She said, "I'm just saying that with great power comes great responsibility." "Responsibility to whom?" Julia's voice cracked like a whip. "To you? To The View? To people who've decided that because I'm successful, I owe them my political opinions." She faced the cameras directly, speaking to the audience at home rather than to the increasingly uncomfortable hosts. "You know what real privilege is? Real privilege is being able to sit at this table every day and demand that other people conform to your political expectations while facing no consequences for your own divisive rhetoric." Her voice carried genuine emotion now. Real privilege is thinking you have the right to judge other people's contributions to society based on whether they align with your political agenda. Whoopi tried to intervene, recognizing that this was spiraling beyond anyone's control. She said, "Maybe we should take a breath." "No." Julia turned to face her, her voice carrying absolute authority. "I'm tired of taking breaths every time someone attacks me for not being the kind of activist they think I should be." She grabbed her purse from beside her chair, her movements decisive. "I came here to talk about a film I'm proud of, to discuss work that means something to me, to maybe inspire people through storytelling. Instead, I got lectured about my political obligations and told that my charitable work isn't enough." As she prepared to leave, she delivered what would become her most quoted statement. "You know what, Joy? I've spent 3 decades entertaining people, inspiring them, making them laugh and cry and feel something meaningful. I've raised my children to be kind, compassionate human beings. I've supported causes that help children and protect the environment. The studio was dead silent as she continued. If that's not enough for you, if that doesn't meet your standards for how a privileged person should use their platform, then I guess we have very different definitions of what matters in life. She walked toward the exit, then turned back one final time. I'm proud of the life I've built, the work I've done, and the choices I've made. I don't need your approval, and I don't need your permission to determine how I use my voice. Her voice carried across the studio with absolute conviction. To everyone watching who's ever been told that their contributions don't matter unless they conform to someone else's political expectations, your kindness matters, your charity matters, your private actions matter. She looked directly at Joy one last time. And you don't owe anyone a performance of your beliefs just because you've been successful. Her final words rang out with quiet intensity. Some of us prefer to change the world through our actions rather than our announcements. The studio erupted as Julia walked out with perfect dignity, leaving Joy visibly shaken and the other hosts scrambling to recover. Within minutes, the footage was everywhere. Social media exploded with reactions that largely supported Julia's defense of private activism over public political performance. Hashtag Julia Roberts Stands Up began trending alongside hashtag private activism and hashtag action over announcements. From her car, Julia's representative posted on her behalf. Ms. Roberts believes in using her platform thoughtfully and authentically. She stands by her approach to advocacy and charitable work. The response was unprecedented. Celebrities who had felt pressured to make political statements praised Julia for defending the right to choose how to use one's platform. Charitable organizations highlighted the millions she had raised through private efforts. Parents appreciated her focus on raising good children as a form of activism. But perhaps most importantly, the incident sparked conversations about the pressure placed on celebrities to perform their politics publicly, and whether private charitable work was less valuable than public political statements. The View faced criticism for what many saw as an ambush of one of America's most beloved actresses. Viewers who had tuned in to see Julia discuss her film and charitable work felt disappointed by the hostile political interrogation. At a film premiere the following week, Julia was asked about the walk-off. She said simply, "I believe in kindness, compassion, and helping others in whatever way feels authentic to you. That's always been my approach, and it always will be." The revolution wasn't just in a beloved actress defending her right to privacy. It was in proving that activism comes in many forms, and public political statements aren't the only way to make a difference. It was in showing that success doesn't obligate anyone to become a political performer for others' entertainment. It was in demonstrating that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to let others dictate how you should use your influence. Julia Roberts didn't just walk off The View that day. She walked away from a culture that demanded political performance over personal authenticity, that valued public statements over private actions, that measured activism by volume rather than impact. She proved that America's sweetheart could have steel beneath the smile when pushed too far. And she showed that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is simply refusing to make the statement others expect from you. Because that day, Julia reminded everyone that true influence isn't about saying the right things. It's about doing the right things. Even when no one's watching. Even when no one's applauding. Even when it doesn't fit someone else's definition of activism. The pretty woman had spoken. Her message was clear. Actions matter more than announcements. Character matters more than politics. And authenticity matters more than expectations. Some truths don't need a platform. They just need to be lived. And Julia Roberts had been living hers all along, whether Joy Behar approved or not.